I'll just share that again, Rob, and we can go around
Right.
the room.
Excellent. Okay, so welcome everybody. Shall we kick off with some introductions so we know who we've got on this session today, where we're looking at governance and how we manage risk within organisations. So, Rob, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, hello everyone. So I think a few of you know me already, but I'm Rob and I'm the chair of In Focus Education and Development here in Southampton. And in my working life, when I'm not doing In Focus stuff, I work for Quilter in town as a capital actuary, and we're talking about that a bit more in a few minutes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob, and thanks for agreeing to come along and speak today. Georgina.
Hello everyone, sorry my camera's not on. I've got workmen in the house at the moment, so I do apologise. I work at Southampton Forward and I assist everywhere, to be fair. My role is split between finance and administration across the whole of the company, across the whole of the charity. So that's me.
Thanks, Georgina. And Freddie. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. Better?
Excellent.
Right, okay, I'm chair of trustees of a small local independent museum in Romsey, actually. And risk is very relevant to us, well, right now and previously, as we had a very serious fire at the end of February. Okay. So we are dealing with the outcomes of that. But I'm also in the process of updating all of our kind of governance docs and strategies and so on. I only took over being chair on the 10th of February and the fire was on the 25th. So it's a bit more eventful than I anticipated.
So yeah, adding you meaning to the idea of a baptism of fire. Sorry,
yeah,
that was
thank you. Thank you.
That was cool.
You had to do it, Rob.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Oh, Freddie, you're very, very, very welcome then.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you here. Good to have you here. Stu.
Hi everyone, I'm Stu. I'm a trustee, and treasurer at COO Music Project. And in my normal daytime job, I'm a biller for a set of economists up in London.
Excellent, thanks, Stu. Good to see you. And actually, I should mention I'm also a trustee of COO Music as well in my when I'm not doing my paid job. Christiane.
Hi folks, I'm Christiane, pronouns they them, and I'm the CEO of In Focus Education and Development, a very small arts education charity based here in Southampton opposite the Quilter building, funnily enough.
Excellent. We've got someone else just about to join us, Hayley, I think. Oh, I know, got one. Well, welcome, Hayley. We're just doing introductions. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, sorry, I'm late.
Hi.
I'm Hayley. I'm Governance and Compliance Manager at Speakers for Schools.
Sorry, where?
Speakers for Schools.
Right, excellent, excellent. Right, welcome. Okay, good to have you all with us. So let's so today we're going to have a bit of a chat about what we think risk is. Then we're going to hand over to Rob, who's going to give us a talk, and then we've got Matt hopefully joining us as well, who's going to talk about some of his experiences, and we've got plenty of time for conversation. So do we want to, I'm looking at the timings, Claire, do we want to move on to Rob now, because I see we're 10 past, or do we need to have a bit of a conversation?
We're okay for timing, to be fair. I think if we can, I'm just trying to move the slides on, if we can go on to the kind of interactive bit. I'm just going to stop sharing that because it's
yeah, so should we have a bit of a discussion about how we perceive risk within our organisations?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there's obviously a whole range of risks that face running an organisation. I don't just mean about risk assessing particular activities, although obviously that is really, really important. But I guess, should we just open it up to what people's ideas are about organisational risks that we face?
Yes, let's do
And
that. So
if people can just pipe up or pop it in the chat, or
there's some prompts here to help you all think about this.
I mean, I guess one of the most obvious ones is the one that we've just suffered, which is actual, physical damage to the property, to the charity's main site in terms of a major fire.
Yeah,
very much so.
Big risk.
Very much so.
Big risk.
Very much so. Christiane.
Financial and operational and staff impacts and all sorts of impacts that we're just working through.
Christiane, you got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if you were handing over to me or if it had all just gone really quiet. I suppose for a very small charity like ours, a major risk is around finances for obvious reasons, and particularly in the current climate. So that's one of them, but also around how we kind of maintain the staff that we've got and keep them with us, and they don't go off somewhere bigger and better and brighter for whatever reason. So those are a couple of the things. It's about, I think those are kind of probably the biggest risks, but there are lots and lots of other smaller risks that kind of almost come up as you go along a little bit sometimes. Luckily, we haven't had a fire or anything like that. But.
Okay, so we've got a couple of risks there that people have raised that are very much about operational. We've got one that's about financial. Any other ideas or thoughts from people? Rob, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think probably just to follow on with what Christiane was saying there, but I think for a lot of small organisations in particular and charities, there's a real risk around key people in the organisation. So a lot of the time, charities are sustained by sort of maybe a handful of people who really know their charity inside out, and if they left for any reason, I think they'd be in big trouble. So I think that's definitely one for charities to think about.
So reliance on key people and where the knowledge is held, and where the kind of organisational memory is sat. It is a very big problem. I mean, it's a big problem within larger organisations as well, but particularly if there's only a few of you. Any other thoughts? Does anybody?
You've got a whole program risks, haven't you? So you've got the kind of the organizational risks, but then you kind of go into that deep dive of all of the work that you're delivering and all the people you're delivering with, or in partnership with, or for. You've kind of got a whole plethora of risks that you need to manage around the delivery of all of our organizations, all of our charities.
So often, for example, we do an organisational risk assessment, and just as a bit of food for thought, and there's lots of different templates for this. We can probably put some with the notes afterwards, and actually the one from the Arts Council I think is a really, really good example of it if you're a MPO, the one that they make you fill out. But generally it's broken down into risks around governance. So is the organisation being governed properly? Are you doing what it says in your governing document? Are you compliant with all of that, and all those aspects of governance that fall to the responsibility of the trustees? Big risk around that. People have talked about operational risks, and obviously that's the thing that's right in front of your nose all the time. Financial risks, well, it's on all of our minds, isn't it? When you're running small charities, the money side of it is probably the bit that keeps you awake most at night. I think that there are also things that are kind of external risks over which you don't necessarily have much control, but you kind of need to give some thought to. So, for example, big things like a change of government, which may have an impact strategically on where funding is going, which may or may not affect what it is that you're doing as a charity, or kind of environmental factors, or just things that are external to your organisation. You can't necessarily control them, but you can do some horizon scanning and start thinking, how's that going to affect us? So, for example, one at the moment would be local government reorganisation. If you're a charity that's very much based in a place, then the notion that your local council isn't going to exist anymore and might be way, way bigger in terms of its geography. I mean, if you're, say, a Southampton-based charity, how's that gonna? What's the risk around that for you? You know, I think probably the final point, which is really important, it's the slightly boring bit maybe, but is around compliance. So ensuring that you are in compliance with all the laws that you have to be, you know, employment law, all of those things, health and safety, and then also, of course, regulations that apply to you in your organizational structure, and and regulations that apply to the work that you're doing. So that could be particular things around children and young people, or, you know, whatever that kind of might be, safeguarding, etc., etc. So I think sometimes it's useful to think about the risks in terms of those bigger brushstrokes and then try and break them down. And, you know, there are lots, as I said earlier, there's lots of organizational risk assessment templates that are available. There's some really good ones that are particularly tailored to charities, but I think it's a really important exercise for your board of trustees to undertake, probably on an annual basis. Sometimes things wouldn't necessarily have changed, but sometimes, particularly when we think about, you know, laws that may have changed, or the financial position, or external factors, quite often it's good to have a bit of a think about them on a yearly basis. And of course, if you're doing new things operationally, that is going to throw up new risks that you haven't necessarily faced before. So there's a lot around all of this, but I think the templates help to structure your thinking and give a structure to a conversation about risk within your organizations.
There's a couple of good
Any
points
other thoughts
in the chat as well. So Hayley, you've mentioned cyber risk. That's one of the things that a lot of charities and a lot of trustees overlook, actually. I think one of the things, I've been talking to an organization that provides free security support for charities, and it's one of the things that it doesn't feature quite very highly on people's risk assessments. It's kind of it's there, but I think maybe in a lot of cases it's because charities don't really know how to approach cyber risk and what things constitute cyber risk. So that's I think that's a big area of lack of knowledge in the sector. Also, Rob, you mentioned reputational risk. That's clearly huge as well. So significant for charities because of the reliance of donations and external funders. And then Christiane, you've picked up on the fact that there's a huge risk around safeguarding, particularly if you're working with vulnerable people or who are at risk, or your young people. So all of those things go into risk registers. I've just dropped in the chat as well the Arts Council England risk register template. If anybody didn't have access to that, that's there in case you want to use it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one, actually. Out of the ones I've seen, it's written in really plain language. It's very straightforward, and I think it covers the key areas. It's a good one to adopt. Okay.
I'll find the details of the centre that I've been working with elsewhere in the country that provide free cyber risk support for charities. I'll find the details of that and I'll drop that into the notes at the end, and you'll be able to get that from our website as well, because it is a free service for charities. I don't think they advertise it particularly well as a free service for charities, but it is available, and you can kind of you can get training for your trustees, you can get some regular support, that you sign up to a regular email that you can get with kind of top tips and things like that, and it is quite useful. And it also kind of raises that conversation within trustees and within the team to really think about cyber risk.
And scams generally. I mean, I've had some emails this week from what is purporting to be a law firm around the fact that we should trademark our organizational name because somebody else is trying to trademark it. And it's just I mean, we looked, you know, I spent a bit of time looking into it, thinking, hold on a second, and it's just a barefaced scam.
Yeah,
outrageous. Okay, should we,
we've all had them.
yeah.
this.
But this one was sort of it seemed quite credible.
Yeah, they do. That's the thing. They're getting so credible and so
This one seemed quite credible.
yeah. So it's becoming really difficult to find the real things from the fake things. I'm always terrified of anything I get from my bank account or from somewhere else that I think it looks really, really official, and you think, what is that? Let's crack on then, because I'm hoping that one of our speakers hasn't ended up in some horrific risk situation, that Matt will be joining us later. But let's start with Rob Francis. Thank you so much for joining us, Rob. I'm hoping that you're going to tell us a little bit about what an actuary is and does, because I'd like to know a little bit more about that. But over to you. Do you want to try sharing your screen?
Yeah, I will do. See if I can get this to work. Can everybody see that?
No.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I had a yes.
Yeah,
On no there. Is it all good?
Good, thank you.
Okay, I can't see anybody now because I'm showing my screen, so just shout if there's any questions. So first of all, yeah, thanks very much to Claire and Rob for inviting me to speak today. I think I know quite a few of you already, but yeah, for those that I don't, so I'm Rob and I chair in Focus Education and Development, and as I work as an actuary at Quilter. In terms of what actuaries do, we are finance professionals, and we're mostly interested in risk and how that sort of operates in fields such as insurance and investment and pensions and things like that. So I do spend quite a lot of time thinking about risk just on a day-to-day basis. I shan't bore you too much more about what actuaries do, but if you want to ask some more in the Q&A, then happy to deal with that. I think we've probably covered a bit of this already in the discussion, but in terms of what we mean when we talk about risk. So every regulator and funder and organisation will have slightly different definitions of it, but the Charity Commission says that it's the uncertainty surrounding events and their outcomes that could have a significant impact, either enhancing or inhibiting any area of a charity's operations. And risk has become a really big thing across regulators, funders, industries over the last 15 or 20 years. And the reason we're seeing more and more focus on risk is just because it feels like things have just been happening too much. So if you think about the credit crunch in 2007, 2008, that was essentially because bankers did not understand the risks that their banks were running, and the whole thing fell in a heap. You've got political shocks, so America electing Donald Trump not once but twice. Brexit was another big one, and we had the pandemic as well, obviously COVID, which caused some real problems for organisations. So increasingly we're seeing regulators and funders very interested in, they're saying, can your organisation survive a really big shock? Just to highlight a couple of the items in the definition here. So the definition that the Charity Commission gives does say it either enhances or inhibits, right? So uncertainty can deliver positive outcomes. If you took all your charity's money and went down the casino and stuck it on red, that could work out for you. I'm not advocating anybody does that, but there are upsides to a lot of risks, and we just don't worry about them so much because they don't threaten the charity. And the other thing to note is, uncertainty surrounding events and their outcomes. Charities can't avoid risk entirely. Nobody can, right? And just doing anything is going to bring some associated risk with it. And this is why we talk about managing risk. Risk is just a fact of life, but we have to be comfortable with the level of risk a charity is taking and how we're mitigating it. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the risk management cycle in a bit more detail. So there's tons of different diagrams that look a lot like this out in the world. So your 4 steps of identify risk, assess risk, respond to risk, and then monitor risk. I'll talk about each of those a little bit more in a minute. You know, the level of effort and detail that you go to in this is going to depend on the size of your organisation. So at Quilter, you've got a whole risk team looking at basically this circle for 365 days a year. It's rather less in focus just for capacity reasons, but the broad approach to it should be the same across any organisation. And it's drawn as a circle because risk management is an iterative process. Okay, you don't just sort of do it once and then stop. You should constantly be reviewing and monitoring this. So the first step of identifying risks, you know, I think we've actually just had a bit of discussion there with Rob around the kind of risks that charities are exposed to, and there are loads. I jotted a few down as part of the slide, which I think we covered most of them. So securing funding is obviously a massive one for charities. Conflict of interest. So this is where if you've got trustees or staff who aren't acting in the best interests of your charity, that's going to be a really key one, and Charity Commission are really hot on that. Theft of resources, reputational damage, environmental factors. So unfortunately, like the museum in Romsey, they experienced one recently with the fire, and key people leaving as well is a really key one. Every charity will have a unique risk profile. So every charity faces its own unique set of risks. There'll be a lot of overlap, but it's very important that every charity does this because every charity is different. And it's really important when you identify risks to canvass opinion right across the charity, because everybody involved with the charity will experience it slightly differently, and so they might have different ideas about the kind of risks your charity is running. Rob was speaking about templates there before. There's a Charity Commission paper called CC26, which is really, really useful and has a framework for identifying risks, along with examples of how you might do it. So what the Charity Commission recommends is essentially bucketing your risks up into different groups. So you'd have governance risk, operational risk, finance risk, things like this. And it gives lots of examples for things that charities might want to think about. Okay, the second step on your risk management cycle is to assess these risks. And as per CC26, again, a good way to do it is by scoring by impact and likelihood. So obviously high impact and high likelihood risks are your absolute key risks as an organisation. You really need to manage them, but it's worth thinking about all high impact risks, however unlikely they might be. Okay, at this point, just to sort of check that people are still there because I can't see anybody, I'm just going to throw it out, but for the third step of responding to risks, what options do charities have? So what can charities do in response to risks?
If people want to put things in the chat, I can read them out for you. Otherwise, you can open it.
Yeah, that'd be great because I can't see anything. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. If you want to put stuff in your chat, I'll read it out. Otherwise, please do open up your microphones and have a think about what can charities do to respond to risk.
Hi, I mean, just speaking from our immediate experience, I guess the most important one is to have a kind of proper emergency plan in place so that, you know, if you do get a call from the fire brigade at 2 in the morning, you all know what you're meant to be doing.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so definitely sort of having, I mean, I think part of the point of the risk management cycle would be to, you know what you're supposed to do. Sort of arranging these actions. So, you know, if you had a car crash, you know, you would know what to do in that situation. You know, you'd sort of talk to insurers and all that kind of thing. And it's the same thing with this.
Christian,
sorry, is there something else?
Yeah, Christian's got the hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, like, obviously you've got your risk register and you might canvass opinion from across your organisation, but I think also delegating the responsibility so that it's not one person responsible for everything all of the time, so that it's kind of a bit more fresh and people have some ownership around those risks as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I think in terms of responding to risks, we tend to sort of say that there's one of 4 things you can do with it. So the first thing you can do is you can just retain the risk and say, that's just a fact of life. I'm aware of it, but we're going to keep doing this thing, so we have to accept it. The second thing, and I think this is what people most talk to, is to try and reduce it. So we know there's a risk there, but if we do X, Y, and Z, then we can lessen its effects. So Christian, they're talking about ownership of risk. If somebody's responsible for it, then they take that on and they look after it. But it's things like putting controls in place. So in the fire example, I guess you want to make sure you've got smoke alarms there so that you're alerted quickly if something happens, fire extinguishers, fire marshals, that kind of thing. If you're worried about funding running out, you set up reserves to try and cover yourself, these kinds of things. Third thing you can do is just abandon it. So if you've got a project and you just think that's too risky, then maybe risk management says, we don't do that. We just can't put the charity to that kind of level of risk. And then the fourth thing is you can share the risk. So taking out insurance is a typical one there. So if something goes wrong, insurer is going to pay. You could say, if you're worried about cybersecurity, you can hire a third party to manage your IT systems. Or if you've got a project that you want to embark on that might be too risky for a single charity to do, then maybe you can club together with some other organisations and do it in a joint way. And then just to say on the sort of the sharing point, actually, that this introduces new risk. So we would call it third-party risk. But if you've got an insurance arrangement, you have, let's say, your office flooded and then the insurance refused to pay out, then that's a third-party risk you're looking at there. And any risk mitigating actions need to be proportionate. So there's always a cost of doing this mitigation as well. And so you need to kind of judge whether that's appropriate to the level of risk that you've got in place. And the final step, so on the cycle, is monitoring risks. So the sort of things that charities should be doing. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with the risk register, so that all trustees are aware. But anytime a new project comes in, that needs to be properly risk assessed, and any significant change to the charity needs to be reviewed for risk as well. So that's regardless of where you are in your annual risk management cycle. You need to be thinking about that as it happens. Any risk events, so anything that actually happens that's adverse to the charity and quite significant, you need to feed that back into the risk management process. So here's something that happened to our organisation, here's how we dealt with it, this is what we could have done better, this is what we can learn for next time. And trustees need to regularly review the risks. So as Rob said earlier, need to be looking at it at least once a year. But risk management is not a one-off exercise. It's very much a live thing, and it needs to be constantly sort of considered as part of charity management. Just to chuck in a couple of real-life examples we had with In Focus. So we went through the process of converting from a CIC to a charity. We were successful and became a CIO in February last year. I've been involved with In Focus for a bit longer than that, and I think a year or two ahead of our application, we were doing a lot of things to get us ready for charity status. And one of the things we did was we had a look at a risk register for the first time and set that up. And we did come up with some risks. So we noted that we had a lot of key workers with no notice period at all. So here are some people who are really important to the organisation, who know so much, who could wake up on Monday and go, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And that'd be that. So that was a big risk for us, and we've taken steps to address that. Another one was around sharing knowledge across the organisation. So we had a situation where only one person was really managing the financials and really understood about the financials, and we've done work on that because that's a key person dependency. And when you've got those, if somebody is off sick for a long time or leaves or something like this, then your organisation's got problems. So there's just so much value in doing this risk assessment process and really finding out where the weak spots in your organisation are before they become a problem. And just the final thing to mention, I think there are legal obligations for trustees around risk management, and that really varies depending on the size and the structure of your charity, the level of income and that kind of thing. And also many funders these days are very keen that charities have got a proper risk management process in place. But regardless of legal and funding obligations, it's so important that trustees really get a handle on the risks their organisation's facing, know about any mitigations put in place, and make sure that these things are regularly monitored and reviewed, because you want to be able to head these things off before they actually become a problem for your organisation. And final slide. So I've got a couple of links here. The Charity Commission paper CC26 I mentioned. Also, NCVO have got a really good guide on there as well. And I'll put my email on here, so I'll open up for Q&As in a moment, but I'll get these slides sent round, and if anybody's got any risk-related questions later on, then I'm happy to field those as well. Let me see if I can stop sharing my screen at this point.
You have stopped sharing.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. That's great. Really good overview.
Cool, thank you.
There are some other links that I've put together as well, so they'll go on our website afterwards. So Rob's presentation and a few more useful links, they'll all be up there available to everyone after the session. I was just going to jump in and wonder whether anybody had any immediate questions for Rob on anything that he's just talked about, or whether there are some other things that have inspired you to think about something differently. Look, we're going to take a very quick break now, and then we're going to hear from Matt when we come back. So if everybody could come back, can we have, because we've got to finish at 12:30, can we have just a quick 5-7 minute break maybe? Can we come back on task? Turn your cameras off, go and have a walk around, see you at 12:15. Welcome back. I didn't move. You know, take a break and then you just forget to move. That's typical of me. Thank you for staying with us. We're gonna try and finish at 12:30. So Matt, thank you very much for joining us, Matt. So we invited Matt to come along, our COO of Mayflower Theatre, to give us a bit of a flavour, although we've already been doing it, about risk in action. So Matt, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. So this is embarrassing, isn't it, talking about yourself? I think the first thing I was going to say is that I was pretty average at school, pretty hopeless at college, and developed an over-ambition as I went into my early career. So I feel completely unqualified to talk to you about risk, because I seem to have taken as many risks as I can throughout my entire career. But it has given me a really rich background in terms of running startups, working for high-tech companies, and for the last decade working across the charitable sector in leisure and entertainment. And all I'm going to offer you today is like some of those elements that have really stuck with me in terms of all the things we've talked about earlier. You know, managing risk can be, I mean, I like to think of it as a bit like the Gruffalo's child, really. You know, they can be very difficult. They can be difficult conversations. They can be a bit boring. But if you can tame them, you actually, quite often it's just the mouse's shadow. And actually getting the front foot of these risks is really the benefit. And we've talked, and both the Robs have really touched on this, that, you know, if you can identify a risk and really look at the likelihood, more often than not, the likelihood is very low or can be monitored and managed with the right controls. And that's really the opportunity. And I'd stress that that is the role of the trustees and a governance perspective, that they are actually helping to support the executive, or however you're structured, to manage those risks and make sure the controls are in place. So should we have a quick chat about a live example? I've got a large capital project on at the Mayflower. If I'm going to work on the basis that nobody's heard of the Mayflower Theatre, but I really hope you have. Opened in 1928. We're currently planning for 100th year. It's grade 2 listed. And when it comes to a construction project, that presents a whole bunch of challenges that we've had to work around. We're one of the largest on the South Coast. And what that means is we're generally the first theatre for when West End shows tour. So there's a little something for the South Coast that actually connects us to the West End in a big way, thanks to the scale and the size of the theatre. The charitable trust is approaching its 41st year. And, you know, we have 3 social missions, if you like. Run a sustainable charity being the first one. Ensuring a mix of art and culture is put on for the people of the region. And the third one is to preserve the building for future generations, which is a big onerous project. As you arrive at 100 years, things start falling literally off the building. So we've got to stay on the front foot of that activity. And we also decided to, in the middle of the pandemic, add on Mayflower Studios, which I think is fairly ballsy. But we could do that because we manage our financial risks. So in the period when a fellow charity failed, we were able to prove to the Arts Council and the City Council that we could take this on and drive that forwards. And I would absolutely put that down to a good relationship with our trustees and really managing those financial and governance risks. And without going into a lot of detail, the way we did that, we structured with a second charity with the same mission. So we have a benefit in kind and a service level agreement that runs between the two, and it enables 2 charities to work in unison together, but without overexposing one charity to another's risk. And the last thing, shameless plug, if you haven't seen Hamilton, it's on till the 26th of April. Still got tickets. Right, okay. So the project that I inherited, I joined 2.5 years ago, and this project was initially billed to me as a £5 million extension to the theatre. It incorporated a double height rehearsal studio with level access that would incorporate direct access to the main stage and accessible dressing rooms to make sure that we could represent everybody in our communities on our stage. So that was the project. Can you see the picture there that says artist impression? Can you see that? Okay, so that's what we're trying to build. Now, from a governance perspective, £5 million of charitable money is a significant ask. And the way that we did that is we set out a financial business plan as well as a social impact plan. And the social impact talked to the mission of the charity. And actually, they say a picture speaks 1,000 words. The picture on the right there shows what those young performers across the city experienced for the very first time coming into theatre. Now, I don't know about you, but your first experience in a rehearsal environment in a loading bay is not where we want to be. And actually, that became the most powerful unifying justification for our trustees because it spoke directly to the mission of the trust. So I add that in there because I think my tip would be for managing the risks in an organization. It's about how those risks should take you away from delivering your social purpose or your social mission as part of that charity. When you put it into that context, it's less about the boring topic of risk and it's more about what are the inhibitors to us being effective at the thing we're here and assembled to deliver. So, moving on. Gives you a bit of an idea as to what this thing is that we're building. It is a building project. There's a lot of complexity to it. If you can see the picture on the left there, all of those boxes, if you like, are containing elements that connect the historic building to our administration building, which was built in the early 2000s with this brand new building. It has to meet quite a lot of rigorous building standards nowadays that the others didn't have to. None of the levels connect, and there's a lot of residential properties around it. So there is inherent risk built into this entire project, and I'll drill into that in a second. Now, nobody wants to be sat in that boardroom with a high risk profile project, loads of complexity and loads of room for error, and it doesn't go to plan. So my first tip really is, don't be that project manager. Don't bring the excuses. Lead with a proactive challenge and also with the solutions that go along with that. And that is absolutely about identifying where the risks are. In fact, actually, Rob's already covered it. It's the wheel. Identify the risks, assess those risks, and then work through the process of the controls and the mitigations to either completely remove them or to manage them. So in this particular one, the first thing I would say is you need to make sure you've got the right people match the right tasks. So you know those people who are not completer finishers, they're not your people you're going to need to have on your risks, your risk register, your risk management. But they might be the people that say, I think this should be something we should be looking at. So make sure you surround yourself with the right people. If you've done your ColourWorks way stuff, those people that are high blue, those high blue energy, that's really helpful. Make sure everybody has their clear roles and responsibilities identified. And actually, from those trustee conversations earlier, I'd really say that actually it's a different scenario that I'm dealing with. But clearly there's a breakdown in terms of the roles of a trustee from a governance perspective, and also their responsibilities and duties, which I'm sure if they really understood that, they might pay a bit more attention to some of these topics. We've touched on it already. Really identify and manage those risks. I would really strongly recommend building it into an engine room. So you manage your risks, and you share those risks, and you talk about those risks on a regular basis. Once a year is no good. You know, we manage our risks at the Mayflower every 2 weeks. We come together as an executive, and we will go through and we will highlight them. It is well worth doing it, and it really embeds the importance of connectivity about our duties as either executives or as trustees, and how we best protect our trusts. I think as well, really putting in that transparency of communication. So when new risks emerge, so the ECCTA has come up, everybody should be working towards that now. Having those briefing documents to your stakeholders and your trustees to make sure they understand what that new regulation requires. You'll probably have a lot of the things in place already, but they need to know early and often. So make sure that transparency is there. And I would strongly suggest that if they don't want to listen, you've got to force those arguments to come forward, because it's a requirement of Charities Commission, it's a requirement of good governance, and they have personal responsibilities. So let's not see Mr. Sugar again. Here's a couple of examples of some of the project roles, responsibilities on my build project. I'm not going to go through them because I appreciate it really isn't that boring. It really isn't that interesting, but it does show these. I have 14 consultants working on this project. Here's just a snapshot of some of these. And, you know, every single one is an expert in their region. And as a overarching, you know, internal champion for this, keeping appraised of all of this is a real challenge. And actually, that's the biggest challenge, I think, as a charity, is making sure that you're across your brief here on this stuff. So make sure roles and responsibilities are clearly identified. It's a building project. You know, second to farming, construction is one of the highest, has the highest death rates. So, you know, we've really talked about fire in this conversation. You know, this is when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. So that's the attitude we come at this to mitigate and prevent us being in the coroner's court. Outside of that, there's longer term hazards. So asbestos, we've got power cabling, which I'll touch on in a minute. But then there's budget creep, the classic, oh, it would be nice to have. Yeah, if I could have £1 every time somebody said it'd be nice to have, I'd probably have a bit more money to spend. And then around that, things like the macroeconomics. So steel price in the last 5 years has been very turbulent. Fortunately, it has reduced a bit, but we've seen 25% shocks in steel construction price. That's really difficult to manage, but we can't pretend it's not happening. And then the other one, really, from my perspective, is project overrun. I'll just give you an example. This is unlike a project I've run before, in that I've actually got an end date prescribed to me before we've even started. So we submitted our planning application early at the beginning of this financial year, April 24. The planning application came through and we went straight into tendering, and we're kind of around this position here now. So we're in a pre-construction phase. Now that planning phase, 8 to 16 weeks, actually overran from that. So we had to run the tendering process whilst we were completing the planning. But this green bit over here is really the killer. So I've got to build this thing and deliver it by the 25th of May 26. So all of my planning has got to be building into a contingency. And the reason for that is we've got a very specific programmed period of time where we can do the final breakthroughs and we don't have anything on stage. So we can run our operation throughout the whole of this construction without causing ourselves any challenges. So my mantra is prepare, prepare, prepare. That is the single biggest thing for this project. I'll just point you to the last bit here. I don't know if any of you have run building projects, but we use the Royal Institute of British Architects REBA process, and we're currently at REBA stage 5. You have to get to stage 4 in order to submit a planning application. To get from 0 to 5 in terms of architectural fees is about £250,000. So significant risk is having to be spent by the charity to create a planning application for something you may be refused on. And that's a really interesting risk dynamic in terms of sunk costs. And that had to be managed extremely carefully. So I know it's past, I'm moving, Claire. Risk management, we've touched on these things. Risk register absolutely had to sit at the heart of this. But there's nothing to stop good old-fashioned, if I can see it, I believe it. Just a small anecdote. We had site surveys in the ground where we're going to be drilling, where the cables are going to be. These are all the 11 kV, 11 volt power cables for the region. They were a meter in the wrong direction from the survey. So one of my other tips would be, don't always believe what you're told. You know, sometimes you've got to go to first principles. You've got to get dirty and you've got to dig some holes. You can take that metaphorically or actually in this case. Manage your stakeholders. Make sure your communications are well set up and are frequent. Do not wait to be asked for updates on managing risks. You know, even if there's no change in the risk, say that there's no change to the risk. Is a really helpful thing. Last 2 slides, Claire. Focus on the communications around the why, not the how. Prepare. Can't emphasize that enough. Really approach risks as an opportunity. Don't see them as a boring, oh, we've got to do that. See it as, this is how we're going to be really effective in running a charity. Red team, blue team, no time for that now, but really utilize that. If you Google it, if you're not familiar with it, use your red team to most effect. Be cautious about publishing completion dates too early. Don't put a year on it, is my advice. And send briefing packs to your trustees about some of these big things that happen in your organisation. You do not want trustees making it up on the spot or going off piste. Make sure they are well briefed on whatever you're doing, okay? And also utilise things like SharePoint. You know, nobody wants to spend 3 months working on the wrong set of plans. And the last bit is governance of a charity is absolutely what trustees are there for. And it's our job to help them be effective in their role. Make sure you schedule really regular reports that highlights whether a project's on schedule, on budget, and where the risks are. I think that really connects their obligations to whatever you're doing. And Claire touched on it earlier, you know, trustees should be a wealth of experience and support. It's not always the case, but they should be. So you tap into it. And I'll leave you on that. Complex projects rarely go to plan. So start from that basis. Surround yourself with the right people. Don't be the ostrich, and share the problem with experts and do it early. There you go.
Thank you, Matt. Whistle stop tour. I feel like I understand where your brain comes from now. From that. But thank you very much for that. We are running over slightly, and if you have to leave or you've got other meetings, then thank you so much for being here, and please do off. But are there any questions for Matt? Matt, do you want to stop sharing? Thank you. Are there any quick questions for Matt before we wrap up? We're all just in awe of your risk management of a massive capital project. So can I just say at the beginning, I'll come to you in 2 seconds, Christian. You said at the beginning it was sold to you in this particular way at the beginning. The inference there was how it was sold to you at the beginning when you first started, and what it is now has changed quite a lot, and that can happen quite a lot in a capital project. So how much has it changed from what you thought it was going to be to what it is actually going to be?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was sold to me. It was kind of, you know, what I inherited set us in a particular direction. And actually, that's the great thing about that process, is actually where we've ended up is probably it is very different to where we started, but it's more rounded in the thinking. So we've taken opportunities to improve on the process, but to do that within the same budget has been a bit of a challenge.
Thank you, Christian.
Yeah, it just kind of struck me when Matt was talking then, actually, and listening to what other people have been saying today, how much around risk is linked to actually the last set of talks that we had around who sits on your board that I was at and that I talked about. And I think it's a really interesting thing that sometimes people are targeting types of people because it's what they think funders want to have sat on their boards, and or people just, they're not looking in the right places for trustees. Except I think there's a whole complexity around how you get people onto a board. And I think one of the things that we've tried to be really, really kind of hot on, I suppose, at InFocus is looking at what are the gaps that we have in the skills and who do we need to be sat in that space with us, rather than have we tick box the right number of people with disabilities or global majority or whatever, you know, like we haven't approached it in that way, regardless of what funders may or may not want, because you do need that breadth and spread of knowledge and skills and experience on the board. And I think when you start to get that, it makes a lot of those other things, I feel, kind of melt away, because people know where their strengths lie and what they've been brought in for, and how they fit into that puzzle, because a board of trustees is a puzzle and you do need to try and complete it, and it's not an easy puzzle. And I get it, if you've inherited something where they all just came in and went for it at the beginning, that can be difficult to work on. But I think it is about being really clear who sits there, because I need to have a really good, strong board. I'm really small charity, very few staff, and the strength of our board is testament to the fact that we are not all just lying on the floor in this office right now, because that's what's keeping us going. And I think it's really important, really, really important. It just struck me how it all seems to like be meshing together.
It's a really, really good point, Christiane. I think the other thing about having that board and surrounding yourself, I mean, Matt just said it, surrounding yourself with the people that you need to surround yourself by. That's your board advisory groups. They don't have to be the formal board, but the trustees are really important. But advisory groups also play a role in that support as well. But I think it's also about the vision of the charity and where you want to be. So, the trustees are helping you get to a place that's in the future as well. So having a group of trustees around you who can help that kind of North Star guidance of the charity. How do you get there? And that you've got the right skills to take you to that place. So really interesting conversations. Thank you all so much for joining us today.